Hello and welcome to this Tuesday, 15th October special edition of Nation Watch. My name is Mervyn Williams. I'm your host. Nation Watch is a production of the People's National Congress Reform. This evening, we'll be discussing the presentation by Mr. Ali to the Parliament of Guyana. But before I introduce my guest and get down to business, conversational business, I'll tell you a little story after we look at these clips. Now, the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the parliamentary opposition, Mr. Aubrey Compton Norton MP, has been advocating for a people-centered development strategy, and he has been outlining his people-centered development strategy at every available opportunity, whether it is at public meetings, roadside meetings, press conferences, parliamentary addresses, and more recently at the biennial delegates Congress of the People's National Congress Reform. Let's listen to clips of Mr. Norton as he speaks to his people-centered development strategy.
Offer ourselves to the people of Guyana as the ones who can do that with our people-centered development strategy and vision that put the interest of our people first.
We are talking at present about a people-centered development strategy. In that strategy, our aim is to ensure we improve the quality of life of the people of Guyana.
And we say to you, in government, we will have a people-centered development strategy in which we utilize the resources of this country to put it in the hands of the people of Guyana.
Right. So you just had a glimpse of Mr. Norton speaking to his people-centered development strategy. And, you know, when I was a boy growing up, we were often told the story about a dull pupil in school who would sit next to a bright pupil in school and look over at that pupil's paper or book. And as the old people used to say, cog, and as we say, copy, to the point that the teacher accused him of copying and he denied it. But when the teacher showed him his book, he had copied even the name of the person whose work he was copying. Let's look at a mirror of that story in adulthood and in government.
This people-centered policy-making matrix of the PPP civic government is one that always put the welfare of our people first.
At this point, I'll welcome my guest, Mr. Aubrey Compton Norton, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the parliamentary opposition to Nation Watch. Welcome, Mr. Norton.
Good evening to you and your listening and viewing audience, and thanks for having me.
Would you care to comment on the clips that we just looked at in view of the fact that there is wanton deception, wanton copying, cutting, pasting, amending, and watering down of policies that you've been adumbrating through your leadership role?
This isn't the first occasion. From the time I had outlined what our people-centered development strategy will be, the PPP first tried to use the concept of people-centered development. And there was some pushback on it because we had already outlined it and so. But I think more important than that is that we have been able to get over to the Guyanese people that the government does not have the interests of the people at heart. And we've been showing them that. And as that political pressure builds on them, they are now beginning to respond to the comments we are making, but they are becoming so ridiculous that they're using the same language. And this is not new, you know. Let us not forget in 2006, we talked about one Guyana.
And ran
an election campaign based on one Guyana.
Yeah.
And then out of the blues, Irfan Ali come and he's utilizing one guy. And of course, not in the way we intended. We intended it to bring the people together, etc. So it is not new for the PPP to copy. It is one of the most barefaced political parties you can find. Just look at Barra Jagdeo after he lost in 2015, saying we must get biometrics, we must get a clean voters list. And by the time he's in government in 2020, he's against a clean voters list, he's against biometrics. Let us not forget that when I outline our people this center development strategy, and when I said to Guyanese, we need to put the people first, and we outline the things we will do. The very Barra Jagdeo said that Norton was pursuing economics in which you're going to eat out the economy. I remember us responding to say that it should be seen as an investment in people rather than eating out the economy. And now, immediately after that, the very PPP turns around and now seeking to outline these measures. Now, you must understand why they're outlining these measures. They're outlining these measures because they believe in putting the people first. They're outlining these measures, one, because they are under attack for corruption, and they want to deflect from the pressure being built on them on corruption. Two, they think these ideas have emerged as popular ideas. And so, as part of the political election gimmick, they are going down the road. But as I will show you later in the program, or I can show you now, when you know that they aren't serious and they aren't focusing on the development of the people, they are merely responding to obtain some popularity and to reduce the pressure on them for being the most corrupt government in the history of this country. I want to look at one of the announcements they made, that they're going to give this 10,000 for medical assistance. Let me read for you what the Constitution...
This is for children.
For children.
Mhm.
Let me read for you what the Constitution says. It says in Article 24, every citizen has the right to free medical attention and also to social care in case of old age and disability. Now, if the laws of Guyana say that medical attention is a right, you have a network. The only institution with a network of medical institutions across the country is the government. The friends of the PPP might have one here, one there, etc. Why is it? Let's assume you give this 10,000 to a child in Port Kaitumo, where they probably don't have the private facilities. They don't have it at the hospital. Then it wouldn't mean much. The government really should be taking those same resources and developing the medical services across this country so that people can access free medical facilities wherever they are. But don't believe the government did it by accident. They have their friends building hospitals. And when they know that they are mismanaging the health sector, and for people to get these services, they have to go to private persons. What in essence they have done is to find another way to put money in the hands of their families, their friends, and their favorites. So Guyanese must not be browbeaten by this talk about 10,000 for medical assistance for children.
It's not for the children.
It
It's
is
for the
not
friends.
for the children. And if you look at how the country is structured and where these resources can be accessed, you will see, because it has to be taken in the wider context. A lot of medical supplies that are produced, purchased for the hospitals, don't meet the hospitals. And when they meet the hospitals, they are taken from the hospital, put into private institutions, And when the people go to the hospital, they are sent to the private institutions. So what the government is doing is skillfully dismantling public health and seeking to put it in the hands of their families, their friends, and their favorites. And so they are violating the Constitution of Guyana, which states very clearly that they have this right, and the state should be providing the resources. Mind you, we're not against private hospitals. We're not against private medical facilities. What we are against is your incompetence destroying public health. You are not providing the things that are needed. You are not implementing plans to have an efficient public sector medical services. And then you have your cronies in the medical system. Even the little that you provide, they are taking it out, sending it to their friends, family, and favorite, and then they direct them to the pharmacy to get it. What we are against is the corruption in the medical sector. What we are against is the incompetence of the People's Progressive Party, in which they cannot put in place a proper healthcare system so people across this country could access it. And then you come now as if you want to serve the people.
In any event, if you cannot adequately manage the public health system and people must resort to private institutions for medical care, pay a livable wage so that people can afford to do that. But we move on. There is obviously major confusion in the People's Progressive Party. You have constantly situations where the person sitting in the chair of the president says something, and then he's countered by the person who once sat in the chair of the presidency. We will look at a couple of clips here, and then we'll discuss as
This one-off cash grant payment to household instantaneously.
It's not true. When the president made the announcement, he said immediately things are going to start. People want to know when.
So
immediately.
we want to get the system in place. So I anticipate that within the next 5 months, we will complete the process.
And then there's a newspaper report. The Kaichor News carried a report that says, that quotes Jagdeo as saying that there will be no payment before Christmas. And we have that article there up on screen. Who is the boss? Who calls the shots? Who makes the decisions?
For me, the issue is not solely who is the boss. What that is a manifestation of the absence of a plan. And what that makes clear to me is that they are just responding to the opposition popular posts. And because they're responding to it without a plan, they ended up in what they ended up. That's the first what they ended up in. The second thing, there was a tussle in the PPP for the
prominence.
No, this is not prominence. This is the funds that come from corruption. It is well known that Jagdeo has his corrupt cabal, Irfan has his corrupt cabal. And there's a battle between these two corrupt forces. And in that battle, you're seeing in the attempt to implement, the vice president seems to be trying to wrestle control so that his crew can be in charge. Now, let's look at it. Here is it. A president is coming to announce a cash grant. And the government itself has no plan. And you know it has no plan because in the first case, Irfan said instantaneously, and then Barra Jagdeo comes and says in 5 months. Now, if they had a plan, or if they were properly planned, in our last press conference, we identify a plan to deal with the issue. But if they had a plan, the first thing they would have decided is what constitutes a household. Because if you are going to allocate it based on households, then you have to know what is a household. And look at the incompetence of Barrett Jackdale, saying they're going to go first to the electricity bill and the water bill. What happens in the case where the house is owned by a Guyanese overseas and the people living in that house are people who the house is rented to? Who will you give it to? The person who owns the house and live overseas, or the people living there? Then what constitutes a household? Are you saying that a household is determined by electricity and water bills? And if you're not saying that, why didn't you before outline clearly what constitutes a household? The United Nations tend to see a household as linked to a particular income and the people cooking. You can have in one house a mother and a father who probably baked, but they're still cooking by themselves. And they got the income from the pension. So they constitute a household. But the son and his wife living there because they can't find a house or the housing cost too high. But they cook for themselves out of their income. That also constitutes a household. And so the fact that they showed an inability to have a clear plan and a clear idea of what they want to do is indicative of the fact that they are only responding to opposition pressure and they did not utilize their brain to fine-tune a plan. And so what you see there is the normal incompetence of the People's Progressive Party co-mixed with the desire for corruption. And I do believe one should not forget history. The PPP has not shown that it can do a cash transfer in a legal, transparent fashion. You just have to go back to COVID-19 and read the report of the Auditor General. And you will see that COVID-19 distribution was marred by the fact that they didn't define a household. It was marred by the fact that they used PPP activists to distribute the money and they were seeking to make money themselves. It was marred by the fact that you give people a pink slip, claim they're going to come back and they get money, they got the pink slip up until today. There is no confidence in this government. Worst of all, they walk around with cash in a bag rather than using the government system so that it can be traced. Until now, I don't believe anybody can tell you exactly how much money went to the persons they are intended to and how much money went into the PPP hands.
We're obviously going to go past an hour tonight. So the issues are real and they're large. Mr. Norton, you just spoke of corruption and cash transfers. Ali said that he is going to be distributing a certain sum of money. And when you do the math, you recognize that he's distributing to 300,000 households. The records will show that if you look at the 2012 census and you use the average growth over the last 10 years, the 10 years preceding 2012, you will have somewhere in the region of 240,000 households. So that Ali is going to be distributing $200,000 per household to 60,000 non-existent households. So before this program starts, the PPP has identified $12 billion that will not go to the citizens of this country. How do you react to that?
First, let us note one of the weaknesses of the People's Progressive Party governance is that it is not, they don't govern based on data. The governance is not data driven. It is at the whims, fancies, and caprices of Barry Jack and Irfan Ali. It means, therefore, that they pull things from their head. Now, if you look at even what they're saying in housing, the figures they're given, Ghana shouldn't got people without house. How much thousand they created since they're in government in 2020.
But
Well,
the issue here is households. And
no, but I'm just using the houses. Look, when I was shadow minister housing, this will illustrate it more. Irfan Ali was housing minister. He came to the parliament and said he created 20,000 house lots for the people of Linden. I responded by saying, look, the 2002 census said you have 4.4 persons per household. If you give 20,000 house lots in Linden, it means you would have catered for 80,000 people. But the entire Linden doesn't have 80,000 people. And so it is not new for them to pull data from the skies and to ensure that they have data that facilitates the corruption. And in this case, I think the data is aimed at facilitating the corruption. And I believe it's one of the reasons for which they don't want to release the census. Look, if you look at the trends over the years, you cannot get the level of increase in the population that they are talking about.
but
Even if you add people who would have migrated here, because you're talking 750 to close to 1 million. You're talking about an increase of 150,000 plus. And then remember that Robeson Ben told the parliament that Ghana doesn't have 70,000 migrants. So even if you add the migrants, you cannot arrive at the figure. They have no interest in data. What you're seeing here is an avenue to put 60 million,
it's 12 billion.
12 billion from the allocated money into the hands of the PPP corrupt cabal. That is the bottom line. They will calculate 300 households by 3.6. So Guyana has gone from 250 households in 2002 to 300 plus households in 2024. Sorry, from 2012 to 2024 in 12 years. Now, where in the world does that happen?
What's interesting?
More so, Ghana has a high migration rate.
Yeah.
Guyanese are leaving every day. You can see the figures they are using. They are clearly aimed at putting corruption money in the hands of the PPP.
Well, it's interesting that by Ali's numbers, you're looking at an increase in households of 89, almost 90,000 households of 43%. And if you were to use Jagdio's numbers, which do not agree with Ali's numbers, Jagdio is saying 264,000 households. If you were to use Jagdio's numbers, you're looking at a 53,800 increase in the number of households, which is 26%. So these fellas don't agree on much, except...
Is it that they don't agree or both of them pull from the skies? They don't rely on, the problem is that they don't rely on objective data. They pull figures from the skies.
Well, that's clear because there's another recent report dealing with housing. I think it was commissioned by the what was then the Ministry of Communities, which identified the existence of 50,000 house lots, which were not allocated by the People's Progressive Party government. And then there was another, I believe, 10,000 house lots which were allocated but not taken up by the allottees. And therefore, it is apparent that what the PPP is going to do is they're going to use those 50,000 and 10,000 house lots and categorize them as households for the
But
purpose
there
of
is
skimming
something
off $12 billion.
There is something that should be said here. It is not new. The PPP don't talk about houses built. And there's a reason why they do that. If you talk about houses built, then you will be able to know the amount of people in the house, etc. If you just say house lots, what they are doing is like, I think I saw something today or yesterday that says they give out more than 20,000 house lots. Now, the giving out of a house lot doesn't necessarily follow that a house is built.
Precisely.
And so, once you use house lot and leave it like that, you are increasing the amount of households, for the want of a better word.
Mhm.
So that when you now turn to allocating the monies, you will allocate based on house lots.
Yeah.
But then there are the households to collect it, and you know who's going to collect it. The PPP elite, their families, their friends, and the favorites. And they're running from it. But this is the reality. They do not govern with the interests of the people at heart. They govern in a way that they can make money for themselves.
I want to go down to some numbers here, Mr. Norton. It is apparent that this cash grant issue is deliberately couched in a certain manner to have a desired outcome and impact on the voters' role and the elections which are imminent. Why do I say that? Now, the 2012 census puts our population at 746,955. The recently released official list of electors put our voting roll at 718,715 persons, electors. Obviously, a padded list because the school children population is over 250,000. Now, and I'd like viewers to pay very keen attention to these numbers. Ali says that there are 300,000 households. The numbers say that the average household in Guyana is 3.6. 3.6 persons per household. So if you were to run with Ali's 300,000 households, you're looking at a population of 1.1 million. 1,080,000. If you look at Jagdio's 264,000 at an average household of 3.6, you're looking at 950,000 population.
Mhm.
It appears, Mr. Norton, that the People's Progressive Party wants to cultivate in the minds of Guyanese that our population has gone past 1 million, and therefore a list of electors at 718,000 is reasonable. But the information we are getting from the 2022 census is that Guyana's population has declined. What are your views on this matter, sir?
There are a number of things that should be said here. Now, you had 746,955. I think the last figure I saw from the US is a migration of something like 5,000 per month.
Mm.
So if you have 5,000 per month,
That's 60,000 a year.
it's 60,000 a year. Let us put it at 3,000. That'd be generous. You put it at 3,000 a year. It means every year is,
36,000.
hold on, 3,000 a year, but you have to at least 36.
Mm.
So you have 36,000. If you, 2012 to now is 12 years,
Mhm.
let's put it at 10. 10 years. 10 years, it means 360,000 Guyanese gone. There is no way you can get the figures that they're looking at. Unless they accept one, this list is padded. But why are they going down this road? They're going down this road. First, you have to recognize that they refuse to release the census. Word out there is that they tried to get the people at Statsboro to change the number.
Yeah.
To put it, and even that, I think they had a conflict. One wanted 900, one wanted 1 million. Now, the people at Statsboro, it is reported, refuse to do so because it affects them professionally.
Mhm.
And the laws of Guyana, only tonight I was reading, the laws of Guyana say that a public servant cannot accept an unlawful instruction. And that's an unlawful instruction. But what you are seeing is as the PPP loses its popularity, it is trying to maintain a padded list. It is trying to create the impression that Guyana has more than 1 million people, or at least 1 million, which will facilitate, one, the padding of the list, and two, the numbers they are going to use to thief we money. So one has to see all of these in the context of the wicked nature of the People's Progressive Party. You know, at present, I'm reading a book called The Hijacking of the NBS, what they did to Maurice R. June and Company. I'd recommend every Guyanese read it. And when you read that book, don't worry what opinion the author gives. Worry with the documentation, what the author says. And you will see the wickedness of the People's Progressive Party. And what you're seeing here is a manifestation of their manipulative skills, as well as their barefacedness, because they're not interested in governing the society properly. They're interested in having transactions and the outcomes they want. And all that you're seeing with these numbers are a manifestation of the incompetence, a reflection of the struggle between Irfan and Jack Dale. You're seeing also that they are preparing the bed for increased corruption. That is what you're seeing here. It has nothing to do with the interests of the people of Guyana.
I want to move into another area of this cash grant issue. You had outlined the need for embracing a sustained cash transfer to citizens of this country, putting oil wealth in the hands of the people, I believe you called it. And the government did not listen. In fact, it was Jagdeo who said that such a program will fuel inflation. And then you said to the government when the price of oil hit the roof that the value of the windfall in profits that was not anticipated should go to the people. And you and your advisors had worked out a program that says each household in Guyana from that windfall can benefit from a one-off $300,000 per household, even as you contemplated a sustained cash transfer based on some rules that you had outlined. That windfall was not used for that purpose. But now the oil wealth is being manipulated and a lower value is being disbursed to households, and based on the numbers, phantom households as well. What do you make of the government's approach versus the value that you and the People's National Congress reform have been outlining over time?
Let me say this. When we talk about the 300, that should have been paid since 2022 or early 2023.
Right.
Because it was the windfall that came from the Ukraine war.
Right.
As a result of the Ukraine war, the price of oil went up. Guyana got billions. When we did the division, if you had given to each Guyanese 300,000, it would not have affected the income from the normal oil procedure, because this was additional money that came as a result of the war in the Ukraine. And so when we talk about that 300, that should have been given since 2022 or 2023. But we take a different approach to cash grants. The way the PPP does cash grant, you cannot come out of poverty and it cannot deal with the high cost of living. So what we said, look, there is need for a structured approach. We work out what is a livable income and we pay workers a livable income. Then in addition to that, we're saying, look, we need a structured approach to cash grants. Now, let me give you an example. You're going to give 200 one-off. People spend it out because it's less than 20,000 a month. They can't use it for proper investment, business. They can't use it for anything significant. We are saying there must be predictability. Our approach is one in which we will say to you, look, we're going to give you a cash grant of a particular number. But this cash grant, let's say, will be given to you monthly. Let's say it works out to the 200,000 a month or 150,000 a month. We are also saying that you can now use this as predictable income so that you could go to the bank. You can get a mortgage. In other words, you can use it for investment. In that fashion, people will develop. You imagine the average man who is going to get a cash grant, but he can now go and say, I want to buy a truck. My income is 150. Because it's not a one-off, it is a structured, predictable cash grant which the bank can accept. And we believe that the way to go is not just to give cash grants, but do it in a way that it can impact the lives of the people in a positive way. And our structured approach will impact the people. When these people get this 200,000, which we welcome, though it is little bit, it's done because it is one-off. In our approach, we are working out a cash grant for you, which is structured, which you can use in the bank, you can use for investment, and that is going to impact your life in a positive way. But remember, we didn't only speak to cash grant. I remember Barry Jack, they were saying it will fuel inflation. And I had to turn and point out that we said that when we do that, we will also promote agriculture in every region with the aim of bringing down the cost of food in every region. If you're going to put these resources in, you have to also work on increasing the productivity in the productive section of the economy so that there are goods and services there to absorb the money. So Barry Jagney, who would say we're eating out the economy and it will bring inflation, they now announce a measure and they fail to announce the measures they will take to reduce the inflation. And what in essence you're seeing is they just responding to political pressure. Because had they thought it through, then they would have known that if we are bringing these monies, we have to have a plethora of measures that will seek to bring down the cost of living, deal with inflation, etc. So the very thing he said he was objecting to, you end up doing only because there is constant political pressure. And it again points to their incompetence.
One of the notice one of the noticeable features of the Ali presentation is that almost all of the measures that he brought to the House are measures which you had discussed and measures that you had discussed at a certain level which he watered down. For example, you spoke of the income tax threshold moving to $400,000 per month. You spoke about evening out the benefits of taxation. He's talking about a threshold of what, $100,000 in 2025 or something of that nature. Then he's talking about $10,000 deductible, tax deductible for every child of the working parent, which I have some views about that I believe to be discriminatory, which I don't want to get into at this time. But lifting the threshold to $400,000 makes the tax benefit available to everyone. So why would he seek to bring a minor tax relief to a select group of people? I mean, he as president got 2 children, and therefore he will benefit from the tax deduction. But Mavis or
Johnny got
Lilawati
none.
or whoever got 7 children, but their income does not reach the threshold, and therefore they cannot, despite their best effort, benefit. So the measures seem to be all skewed in favor of the wealthy.
Again, lack of a plan and not thinking through. Let us recall, this is the man who told the nurses they got to wait till 27 to 2030. Remember that?
Mhm.
And then suddenly he finds money. Now let us come to the threshold. We said at the time 150,000, so that the average working person will have to pay no taxes. Since then, we have been in consultation with people at a higher level. And one of the views they express, and I believe when you govern, you have to be responsive to the concern of the people. Some members of the middle class would have said to us that, look, we don't have a problem with you trying to relieve the burden on the extremely poor. But they pointed out to us that, look, we ourselves who are obtaining 250,000, 300,000, we are finding it difficult to live. And so it is in that context, having looked at the figures, we decided that we can put it to 400,000. So it would capture a larger spectrum of workers. Because don't forget, if you're dealing with a worker who's getting 350,000, which is not a lot of money in the present day circumstance, that person will, the first 150, but the rest taxable. Now, if you put it to 400, everybody who is drawing 400,000 and below will go tax-free. And therefore, we widen the base and put more money in the hands of the people directly. And it is for that reason we shifted it from 150 to 400,000. Because as we speak to people, which we have to do, they are raising their concerns and they seem happy that we are looking to deal with the extremely poor, but they also point out that they are facing the pressures, they are facing the high cost of living, and therefore they'll need relief as well. And it is in that context we arrive at 400,000. Our economics people haven't looked at the figures and see it is feasible. So one has to see it in that context, not Ali getting up and he called a figure. The reality is they are doing this grudgingly. Their preference is to put money into waste and through infrastructure so that they can make money on corruption. And so they do not have an interest in the people of Guyana And the measures they're taking, some of them are half-baked, some of them are not well thought out at all. And so in the long term, they will generate more problems for the society than solving it. There are two critical issues to be dealt with by the government. One is the high cost of living, and two is poverty. None of the measures are aimed, not one of the measures is aimed at reducing the cost of living and taking people out of poverty. It is a political gimmick because elections are, the general and regional elections are going to be next year.
Well, in that regard, since you became leader of the People's National Congress Reform, you have been saying that when elected to government, among your priorities, very early up in the life of your government that you will lead, would ensure that free education is returned at the level of the University of Guyana. The PPP also campaigned on the same free education being returned to UG, and it was the People's Progressive Party that started fees at the university in '94. And while they were in government, they had fees as well in the earlier days. Now, Ali has said that by the end of 2025, there would be an abolition of tuition fees at the university, which is inconsistent with the commitment that the PPP made to the people of this country. Another watered down version of the Aubrey Norton APNU plan for education this time. Comment, please, if you will, sir, on the issue of the university education being free versus abolition of tuition, as mentioned by Ali.
You know, a government has to be sensible. The University of Ghana was started by Dr. Jagan, 1963. Burnham didn't come to power and sought to destroy the University of Ghana. He came to power and built a beautiful campus by the 60 standards when it was built, so that our students could go to university. I see my friend Roel Johnson saying he know who built UG. I mean, it's interesting that he has convenient memory, but that apart, Burnham built it. Then in 1976, Burnham's, as part of his philosophy and policy, declared that education will be free from nursery to university. So from 1976, without oil money, to 1994, Guyanese enjoyed free education. And unlike the garbage that Roel Johnson wrote, that people had to get a party card to get to the university, I want to say to Roel, I expected a little more decency from you. Nobody had to get a party card to go to the university. Once you had the abilities, and at that time the university was well independent of the government, and in fact was fighting the government in some regard. So it is absolute garbage that Roel Johnson is talking. But of course, he has to sing for his supper. Not annoyed with him. I like him outside of that. Now, the university became free. The PPP came to power in 1992, and the PPP removed free education and institute fees. So they are responsible for the people of Guyana having to pay for education. We campaigned consistently saying we will return free education long before oil. We thought when we would have discovered oil, then it would have been a simple, straightforward thing. You have the resources. The government until now hasn't clarified its position. We have also said that not only will we restore free education, but we will write off the student loans unconditionally, so that those students who still have loans, I started saying about those present in Guyana, well, them overseas ain't coming back. So a sense it makes. We should write off all the loan. And those who got one and might want to come back will come back if you write off all, and you might have these services. So there are two prongs to our approach. One, free education, and two, the writing off of the loans. But you know what is most interesting and concerning? If you were returning the University of Guyana to the stage where our children and people don't pay for education, I would have thought that if you were a proper government, you would have also outlined what is it you're going to do to improve the university and give an indication of what kind of resources you will allocate. Because don't forget, the PPP has a history of when they can't control an institution, they withhold the funds. And we do not want a situation where there's free university education, but the government isn't financing it at the level that it can be efficient, improve, and be effective. And so I'm saying here, the government needs to do more than saying we will remove tuition fees. And depending on how they define tuition fees, do you still have to pay library fees? Do you still have to pay laboratory fees? All of those things will matter if you are returning the university to free education. And I intend to bring something to Parliament to deal with it. Because if you see how the PPP approach it, you know they had no interest in free education. And so again, it is political pressure that caused them to announce the removal of tuition fee.
Clearly, all of the measures that were announced were knee-jerk reactions to pressure. The reason I say that is because there is no budgetary allocation in budget 2024 to deal with any of the measures outlined by Irfan Ali in his address to the parliament. And based on Jagdio's intervention and the timelines that he put to some of these things, it is indicative of the fact that these measures are likely to be implemented in 2025 and therefore to benefit from budgetary allocations of 2025. But I rather suspect that the kind of pressure that you're bringing to the government following this presentation, they may yet come to the parliament before the end of the year for more supplementary budgetary allocations to save face.
Yes, they might, because we made the point that they can come for it. I don't know if they're going to come. That's dependent on the battle between Jack Deo and Irfan. But I want to make this point. Guyanese must not be fooled. The PPP only recently have been giving out 200,000 and 150,000 to their supporters. So when they're telling you you get in 200, their supporters would have already gotten a lot of money outside of the normal framework. So for them, the 200,000 is addition. For the average man, the 200,000 is new. But we also have got to be very careful that it doesn't turn out like the COVID-19, in which it ended up putting more money in the hands of the PPP and their supporters than in the hands of the people of Guyana.
Well, the issue here really is that there's a carefully orchestrated plan to put these transfers into the hands of individuals. In the case of Mabaruma, $100,000. In the case of, and that's for small business, I understand. In terms of the COVID-19 grants, some households got as much as $1 million, while some got zero. In the case of West Demerara, $250,000. And these were not household grants. These were small grants. They styled as business development grants. So yes, the individuals got. And now this measure that is being preached about here seeks to spread money into households. But I go back to the earlier point I made, and that is that even as this is being done, a clear sum has already been set aside for corruption.
All right. You're saying plan. I'm saying plot.
Well, there you
And there's
go.
a difference between a plan and a plot.
Of course, there is.
If we setting out a plan, we think it will be objective. It will seek to serve everybody. If you're setting out a plot, it will have nefarious means of achieving objectives. And this is a plot. This is a plot to empower PPP people, keep non-PPP persons in poverty so you could control and dominate. Now, that is essentially what they set out to do. Why would you, the day before Irfan Ali announced his 200,000, the day before you are distributing money on the quarantine? Why is it, if you look at region 6 to region 10, region 6 has had, and 5 would have had more than 5 sets of cash grants, while region 10 gets none. So one has to see this as a plot, not a plan. A plot to empower one set of people. And mind you, it's not solely race. It's also political affiliation. Because a lot of Indo-Guyanese who live in those communities are complaining that they are not getting benefits, while right around them, the PPP activists and the PPP cronies are getting. And I wanted to make this point very clear. While there is discrimination based on race, there's discrimination based on politics, and there's discrimination based on greed. And I want to draw another conclusion from the book I told you I'm reading. You know, when I read that book, I don't understand how we allowed the DPP to stay. And I believe she should comment on what is stated in that book. Because when you read the book, there's serious allegations of unacceptable, if not illegal, acts on the part of the DPP. How is it you could, as a DPP, be at the headquarters of a Muslim institution discussing and plotting against the life of 3 people? And one of the things that made very clear to me is that the PPP and Jack Dale will do anything to destroy anybody who does not agree with them. And so I want to urge all Guyanese, even if they can't buy the book, borrow it or something and read it, because it has shown the underbelly of Jack Deo and the People's Progressive Party and Irfan Ali.
Well, some of us have been following that story as it unfolded, and yes.
Well, I follow it as it unfolded. You know,
But now you're inside with the actual document.
You follow it as it unfolded. And I remember when Justice Moore, the Ombudsman, declared an injustice was done to them, some of the things that were being said. But when you are reading it now and you're seeing all the footage from the newspaper, etc., it paints a picture of a government that is very destructive. I would not, if we become government today, one of the things I would like to do, honestly, is to ensure those people get justice as part of our restitution plan. I said before that we will have a national restitution plan. And people who it is established that the government illegally acted against them and deprived them of property.
Somebody wants to know, to be reminded of the name of the book.
The name of the book is The Hijacking of
NBS.
NBS, or the hijack of NBS,
That's a New Building Society.
New Building Society. And so it really hurts me that you can do that to human beings,
Professionals too.
professional human beings with a good record in the public, in the private sector. And I really would like to see us in the future. I've already said there will be a restitution program in which we will seek to engage all those people who have been done an injustice and seek to ensure that they get what is due to them. It's unacceptable for a man to serve 30 years of his life in a professional career, did all that he had to do in keeping with the law, and then you trump up charges against him
Well, there's
and
another
deprive him of all.
there's another case that is ongoing, where it is being alleged that a financial institution hijacked and disposed of a company. And I imagine as that particular case comes to an end, when it does, we will be able to discuss it. You mentioned discrimination, and I wish to remind our viewers that when the cash grants were being distributed in the Mabruma sub-region, a young man named Dixon was put in the lockups for standing up and demanding answers, because his name was on the list to receive the grant and then it was removed. And in demanding answers, he was deemed to have been causing a breach of the peace, and he was put in the lockup.
For more than 36 hours.
Yeah. And so, but Mr. Norton, the final question I want to put to you here this evening is this. In the run-up to the 2015 elections, the People's Progressive Party embarked on a cash grant distribution. I think it was Because We Care or something of that nature. Mr. Winston Jordan on Sunday made it clear that the records obtained by Cabinet upon the AP and UFC acceding to office clearly illustrated that that cash grant, that cash transfer was a one-off. The PPP contends that it was supposed to have continued. The records say otherwise. Mr. Jordan is an honorable man, and he knows what he's talking about. Now we're going into 2025 elections, and the PPP is here now with what they call a universal household cash grant or something of that nature. The people of this country, it seems, the PPP believes that the people of this country can be bought. The people of this country, the electorate demonstrated to the PPP in 24 that we will take your money, but we'll vote you
Which
out.
I think they must do. It's not their money.
Of course.
It's the people's money.
Yeah.
And throughout the local government election, I advocated that our people must take the money. The 200,000, take the money. They're going to come with all this election, take the money. But remember, it cannot take you out of poverty, and it wouldn't deal with high cost of living. And unless you get a government that is people-centered, you are not going to achieve. Look, the PP is using them. Right now in Victoria, they identify a man and they give him contracts. And they're using that same man to engage our supporters, to pull them. But of course, I can visit Victoria. I will talk with the people of Victoria and show them that the real wealth is not going to them. Rich person in Victoria could perceive that they will get contracts to the tune of 7 billion. While they using this chap, I won't call his name here, and he running around like a headless chicken. One man close to the PPP gone with 7 billion. While you are taking African Guyanese community and giving them a little tit here and a little tit there. Take it. But be very, very clear. The PPP has no interest in your community. They have no interest in your development. And only a change of government will allow you to deal with the high cost of living and to deal with poverty and to improve the quality of your life. I'm saying to you as leader of the opposition that in government, we will improve your quality of life.
A good note on which to close today's special edition of Nation Watch. Thank you very much, Mr. Norton, for taking time out to be with us and to bring information to the people of this country. And as you very often say, for Guyana to grow, the PPP must go. That's all we have time for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Until we meet again, God bless.